Prospect House Media.
And now, prepare yourself for the only weekly podcast you won't want to miss. Welcome to the Ameritocracy Show with Troy Edgar, live from our studios in Los Angeles and Washington, D.C.
Hey everybody, I am Troy Edgar and welcome to the Ameritocracy Show. Thank you for tuning in and checking it out. It is greatly appreciated. This podcast examines the conditions for personal and professional growth and opportunity across America. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Ameritocracy Show. We got a great show today. We're going to be visiting with Ann Collier, executive coach. Ann was on our show about July of last year, and I think episode 9. Welcome. How are you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing well. How are you?
Very good. So good to see you.
So good to see you.
Yeah. So we're in Washington, D.C., so it's a remote, we go back and forth between here and L.A. So whenever we're in town, we usually try to do the Georgetown Club. We didn't do that this trip, but in the summer or later when Betty comes here, we'll have to check that out.
We'll definitely have to do that.
Yeah. So hey, what I wanted to do was to talk to you a little bit about, the Sidebar episodes that we do now, or what I've tried to bring on guests that I've had on the show and that got pretty significant reaction from the viewers. And, your background being an executive coach, just a real quick reminder, if you wouldn't mind just kind of reminding people what you're doing, your company Arudia, and what's been going on with you.
Yeah. So it's been a very, very exciting year. We're now partnering with 5 associations to offer our leadership and management training, which has been great because we're seeing a huge investment in up and coming leaders, which I think is really important. Mm-hmm. And that's just been a blast. The funny thing is we say to each other often, planning is essential, mm-hmm. but plans are useless. so it's been a little bit like, in some cases, like building the plane as we're flying it, but we're so confident in our content mm-hmm. and the value that we offer. The logistics all seem to sort themselves out,
So before we get into like the heavy executive coaching stuff, I guess personally, we also usually talk about your horses and kind of what's going on here in Virginia, even though you live in Maryland. Yeah. Any updates on the horses?
Yes. Well, I only have one, but he's gigantic, so he sort of counts as 2. It's been a really amazing journey. So he is now almost 8, wow. and I've had him for 2.5 years. And I never, just like life, I never would have predicted that I would be learning everything that I'm learning. So and what I mean by that is, I'm not just getting on every day and riding and going, mm-hmm. Going on trails or anything like that. I've had to learn almost like a totally new discipline, mm-hmm. which is that learning how to be a horse whisperer, essentially. Mm-hmm. Use my body language to get him to cue off of me, to do things, which since he's 6 feet tall, which is gigantic for a horse. For those of you who are horse people, he's 18 hands, so that is gigantic. and I'm only 5'8", but it still works. But that's just been amazing. And so to see him grow from a horse who had 5 homes by the time he was 5. Wow. So, that's kind of sad. Mm-hmm. Makes me feel like he's a foster child or something. He's been there now 2.5 years with all this consistency. He's just doing so well. He's confident. He's safer. You have to teach them to be safe. And it's a great lesson in learning how to set, loving them. I mean, really mm-hmm. loving them, mm-hmm. but setting boundaries so that they learn how to be safe animals.
Yeah. At some point, you and I are going to have to, I've said this in the previous shows that, you've been an executive coach to me too. And whenever you talk about the horses, we also get into discussions on work-life balance, but we're not going to do that today. Something that I wanted to talk to you about, you talked about, boundaries and limits and trying to kind of, in the context of animals and trying to, and applying that to organizations and trying to make sure that we kind of have the right perspective, the right boundaries and everything in place. One of the most current events that I kind of seen out there that was just in the Wall Street Journal over this last week was here in Washington, D.C., they had the FDIC come under pretty significant scrutiny on some of the stuff going on in that organization. The headline that was out there was that they had Wall Street Journal had reported in October or November of last year that there was issues with potentially the toxic environment, they called it. Notwithstanding the organization looked upon themselves, they'd asked the chairman of the organization, do you see that there's a problem here? And he's like, I don't know if I see it. But they went and commissioned this law firm to come in and do an assessment. And being in corporate world and also in municipalities as a mayor and on county boards and state boards is whenever there is something like that going on, usually bring in an outside counsel to kind of do an independent evaluation. The evaluation was pretty scathing.
It was terrible.
Yeah. So you're familiar with this.
Yes.
I guess just from your perspective as an executive coach, when you look at this situation, could you describe from your perspective what you see there?
Sure. So this is, I'm not going to say this is similar to my clients because as far as I know, none of my clients have these issues, but every organization has issues or challenges, and especially new when you have a new leader. Now he's been there quite some time. So so there's a couple things that I think are really critical here. Is it all comes from the top. It all comes from, so this taps into a body of work called the Actualized Leader Framework that I focus on with my clients and with their organizations. So I, in a sense, coach the entire organization. Sometimes, coaching multiple levels, but, coaching the CEO, that's where you get the most impact. So what I saw in that report was a lack of accountability for poor behavior. So, and first starting at the top, a seeming unwillingness to acknowledge that there's a real problem. So whether that was self-protective, I don't want to see it, or just like he really just didn't see it, like this is okay, you've got a problem either way. So in terms of coaching, I try to figure out which one of those that is and give people then like the tools, for example, to see that. But culture is derivative of the leadership, of the leader and leadership, and how the leader is handling stresses and challenges, what kind of behaviors are okay, what kind of behaviors aren't okay. And then what are the consequences? What was really striking to me is that poor behavior was almost rewarded. Oh, let's give you a promotion. Let's move you. And that's actually a pattern that I see a lot in organizations. This person isn't, which is different than a person isn't succeeding somewhere and let's move them because they have skills and we think this person has value to offer. But hey, let's move them because we don't really want to have the hard conversation of, letting them go or some sort of other disciplinary action.
So the FDIC, some of the information that was kind of put out with this article was, it talked about the chairman of the organization is Martin Gruenberg, and so been with the organization since I think 2005. Been the chairman for 10 of the last 13 years, and so. Like you said, starts at the top. Organization's about 6,000 people. And the law firm that came in to actually evaluate this, they talked to 500 people. That's a pretty big sample set. Like I said, I've been involved where different organizations had to do that. So this is and to start in November, we're sitting here in mid-May. Pretty quick turnaround for something this extensive and this potentially volatile. One of the things that I was looking at, and I'll just kind of read a couple of quotes that I got out of this article, was the senators had questioned this, the chairman, and asked about the allegations of harassment, and basically the lawmakers were saying, I'm really personally disturbed and deeply troubled. Like that was there over and over. And, I think with the hard part when I look at an organization like this serving, at DHS is you got a large organization, you got a lot of things going on. At the very top, including this gentleman, Martin, he is a political appointee. So President Biden appointed him for another term just within the last year or two. And so he can serve. So there is ways to change this out if they needed to. But I also think they need to give the person a fair shake, to be able to go through. So far the person seems based on this article to be participating, but how do you reconcile, like you said, if it starts at the top and the culture's bad? I'm not saying anything or making an observation other than what was in that article. They did talk about this person potentially displaying attributes that didn't help in the process. And, but it seems a lot more structural. One, that he didn't fully get it, and two, that it was happening at different levels of the 600 people where people were getting rewarded for bad behavior. What would be a sequence you would even take something on? Do you start at the very top as an executive coach and you would kind of look at this, or do you almost need to put a triage in place first, because you don't want to, this organization's got a very important mission. And so how do you maintain the mission while going through this?
Yeah. I mean, the first thing I would do is work with the leadership team, the leader and the leadership team. I mean, because you've got to figure out a way to get the change in thinking and approach to sort of spider web throughout the organization. And so, yes, the chairman is the most important person, and you would coach him obviously individually, but you would do a lot of teamwork. You would give them some skills, some insight. I mean, they have the report. I mean, the first thing that I would want to do is get his reaction to the report. Does this surprise you? How does this surprise you? It probably, I mean, I can't speak for him, and I haven't even read the report. But just talking about this in general, to then come up with what are some of the solutions and start coming up with solutions. I mean, there have to be consequences to bad behavior. Something that really struck me in reading the article is how disempowered staff felt, especially women and minorities. Frankly, they felt to raise concerns. So he may not have known the extent of it, but certainly there was a lot of hiding, probably some hiding of misbehavior from him. And when there's a culture of that, then you can get away with it. Well, I won't. You ate out of the cookie jar, but I won't tell your mother. That doesn't really work, because you can't solve a problem that you're not acknowledging.
So the reason why I wanted to talk to you about this article is that when I was preparing to go into government, that was our interaction, right? And I really wanted to make sure I could understand the blind spots that I might not see, just kind of be able to go through. You're walking into an environment, this guy clearly has a long period of time. It wasn't like I could be here for a year or 6 years. It's like he gets the appointment as the cross administration. Somebody has to actively then not appoint him again in 5 to 10 years. But I remember meeting with you, and one is starting with myself, to try to kind of figure out. But the second thing is knowing my blind spots and then trying to kind of prosecute them once I was in. And in DHS, 250,000 people, and my staff about 3,000 total. It was something I don't know. I put myself in this guy's position, and I'm just thinking, how could you prepare if you are somebody that's about ready to take over a large organization, and you kind of see this as a case study?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things actually to think about too. And your position was different than his. But one is to recognize what the old culture is. As I've kind of coined this term of having a hangover culture. So I know you as a leader. You are you're calm, you're thoughtful. You're confident, you are very curious, you figure things out, you're smart, all of the things that you need, right? So, but yeah, going into a big organization, they have a way of doing that. And by the way, early on, if you remember, I started my career as a tax lawyer at the Internal Revenue Service. So yes, that there's a culture there too. So I have my own sense of and little laughs about bureaucracies, and they kind of persist, and people would always say, oh yeah, just wait till the political appointees go, just keep doing things the way you want to do them. But my point really is to recognize the culture that you're walking into, have an assessment to recognize you're not going to figure out where you need to make impact, right? Because if you're only going to be there for 3 or 4 years, that's actually not that much time. Focus on what you need to focus on having your team, your direct reports, building a lot of trust with them fast, like really quickly. You want people to tell you the hard things, the things that are not pretty, so that you can at least know about them and fix them if you need to. Now, so when you go to like a big organization, like we're talking about the FDIC, when somebody's been there for a long time, that culture, it's a little bit hard, I think, probably for a lot of people to believe that he didn't see it, but really maybe he didn't. Like I said, that's a different problem. You've got to take some steps to make some changes, and you've got to be able to rely on the people around you to be open and honest, which then means for you as a leader, if you're someone that throws temper tantrums or some version of that,
which they allege in the article,
are you creating, enough safety for the average person who has the average amount of grit? Like, I don't even know what that is, but, to really tell you what you need to know.
So Ann, I said there was a couple reasons why I wanted to talk to you. This article got me thinking about really psychological safety in the work environment. And I know just recently, because I follow you and what's going on in your organization and some of the things you do on top of like your leadership academy, you also write articles. And one of the articles that you wrote that was kind of interesting to me and was on psychological safety in the workspace. And so I guess maybe if you wouldn't mind, talk a little bit about the article. We've set up the construct of the discussion of this issue that has happened at FDIC. For some of us that lead organizations, and I always think, what can I learn over this article? I want to be the good leader. I also don't want to have blind spots. So it's a great case study. But I thought in your article it was kind of interesting because definitely from your perspective, you see a lot of different organizations.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about your article and kind of the construct?
Yeah. So the article is called Amplify Engagement with Psychological Safety. And when I think about all the challenges that I see, so whether we're talking about nonprofits, community behavioral health organizations, associations, law firms, corporations, people are people. So in many ways, it's all the same issues, right? And the complaint that I hear often is kind of like we're not getting enough out of our people, or we're so thinly resourced, we have to get as much out of our people as we possibly can. So getting the most out of your people means that they're fully engaged, right? And if you look at some of the Gallup research, and I haven't read an updated study, but like it's pretty scary about how many people are disengaged. It's something like, it's like probably over half of the workforce, right? All right, so think about all those man hours or person hours that organizations are paying for, but they're not getting value from. They're taking up a spot, and then there's like low morale, right? So for people to be fully engaged, for them to be excited about sharing their ideas, to put themselves out there, they have to feel safe. So we do a lot with a problem-solving style assessment tool called the Curtin Adaption Innovation Inventory, and it measures problem-solving style on a scale of more structured to less structured. And the population is distributed on a bell curve. So most people are in the middle, right? Most people aren't super, super structured. Most people aren't super, super unstructured. We all know who those people are in our lives. Most people are in the middle. But here's the thing is every time I do a program, the people on the very ends, where there's only like 2.5% of the population, right? So there are not a lot of people like them. So they feel different. Say, yeah, I hold back my ideas. You can't have that in an organization if you're out there trying to accomplish big things that are really difficult and require creativity, innovation, and other kind of problem solving.
So, yeah, being in the tech industry, we really value everybody's contribution. Like everybody needs to try to be all in. It's interesting is that, I was telling you a little off mic is, I'm going through a really exciting time for my career of building a brand new organization for an area that I'm in charge of. And the leadership team is really working hard to try to come to terms with, this, we've got, everybody's in place, it's moving. Big discussion we were having was on culture and what is the culture? and kind of how do you go there? And really the psychological safety is like, one of the comments that was made was, we want to be a group that people want to be a part of that group. Like they hear how good we are. In Big Five Consulting, after I left corporate world and went in to become a partner like PricewaterhouseCoopers or Accenture or Deloitte in the consulting world is, this sounds terrible. And people that work with me in those days knows this is true. But, you were incented to really create your own mini company. You were like, you were the guy. I could go sell little fiefdom. I could sell anything out there, within measured limits, and then being the first guy, then you have 2 or 3 people that can kind of come in and do the detail planning, and then the functional experts, and it's like a band. And then once you do that, you win, then you got somebody that can come in and actually transition a whole team into there, and you go and do it to the next place. And if you can do it enough times, you become a partner in a firm because you've built a business. But that business, like I said, operates where it's a little cliquey on the inside. And, I left Big Five Consulting and now come back in through IBM, and you don't see that type of environment. But again, going back to creating that culture and making sure, because I'm old school, and I think you do want to kind of optimize the group. Sometimes the bad parts of that was you're not a good rule follower for the big company.
Yeah, I can totally appreciate that because I'm on the unstructured side. So the rules. Sometimes I don't see them. Sometimes if I think they don't make any sense, I sort of say to myself, I'm not doing that.
Yeah, well, and I think that's the tough part is like also as an executive, you want to set the tone, but I still got that old school in me where it's like, and stupid little things, training's coming at you from all directions. The firm is trying to focus on all these different things, so they want you to kind of do these. And it's like, no, we need to go make these sales. We need to build this business. And we got clients. Clients are the most important. If it is truly the most important, then why are you taking off to go do that? And so you find yourself, and I started thinking about the article about FDIC is, that's the blind spot. It's like pretty soon, maybe you're not helping that employee have a good place to be promoted because they're going to pick up some bad habits. And so in your article, as you were kind of going through and developing that psychological safe place, I think as a leader, sometimes it's hard that you don't get pulled into, bad behavior. And, the tantrums that the guy at the FDIC, there's a lot of pressure in that seat. I'm not making excuses for the guy.
But there is.
But he's got Congress on him. He's got, the staff. There's a lot, especially in Washington, D.C., there's a difference between the political and the career people. And so sometimes that makes it tough. So any tips or anything you can think of in that, if you're trying to help me a little bit here?
Yeah. I was raised by 2 lawyers. So my mother was in the first wave of lawyers who graduated from law school in 1976. So, so that means that I grew up with 2 pretty stressed out people. And so this is and I'm telling you this because it kind of informs my life and my approach. If you are stressed out, you are not thinking clearly. And so what you're talking about when you're talking about the bad behavior that's referenced in the article, throwing papers, the yelling, that kind of behavior, in the framework, the actualized leader framework, that's called the shadow behavior. So the shadow is embedded in our subconscious. It's triggered by stress and fueled by negative emotions like fear, anger, and jealousy. So it's not conscious. Nobody decides today I'm going to just go in and I'm going to throw a bunch of papers at the wall. If it is completely a reactive behavior. So in the coaching and in working with teams, what I do is I want them to, understand kind of in a no judgment kind of place, like, all right, so you can choose to think objectively and stay in a problem solving mindset, or you can choose this other behavior. Now I say that like it's an easy choice. It is very simple to understand that intellectually, right? Like objectivity or shadow behavior, that's easy. But no, it is difficult because in the moment, going to your point about all the pressures, you are doing everything you can, like there's a saber-toothed tiger chasing after you to stay alive and to be successful and to drive results, like your life depends on it. So the hard thing is that when you're in that place of being just completely stressed out in your shadow, then that's when it's hardest to think objectively about what's going on. So for everybody, if you've ever been impatient, that is what we call the asserter shadow. That's the same thing. Like you are chafing against the fact that you don't have control. You want something to get done and you're, worried you're going to miss your flight. You're tired of standing in line at the DMV, all of those kinds of things. And there is actually a free assessment, short form assessment. If you go to ATP.com, where you can see your primary leadership style, your style under stress, and then the effects on culture.
Okay. No, I think that's helpful. It's, as you're kind of going through that process, like you said, especially if you try to maintain coolness and balance, as higher up you go, you want to be the guy, you want to be the calm person in the room. I will tell you, and I share this with my team even today. It's like, I run. My horse stories are pretty boring, but I had a buddy come in from USC today, and he came to town. He's like, I thought he'd want to have dinner. I think maybe coffee, drinks. He's like, you want to go for a run? I hear you run. So we got up, dark 30 and did a run out on the mall. And
awesome.
Yeah, from my place. And so as, we're on like mile 4 or 5. And when you run with somebody, it's a lot different than running by yourself because you're talking while you're running and it's a killer.
It is.
And I'm not normally like a talker, especially at 5 a.m. But I got done and we were both out of breath. So we were just kind of enjoying the time. And the issues that I was dealing with kind of came very clear to me.
Yeah.
And so like outside of work, I'm finding the higher levels that I get to, I need to have balance, whether it's my guitar playing or that. And, but what I wish it would happen is a little bit more while I'm in the midst of whatever the situation is. So I guess the kind of pulling back a little bit and not getting sucked into it and give some space to let the water.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because often the only time that people get to actually plan or think is when they've scheduled a session with me as their coach.
Yep.
Because then it's completely about you. It's about what do we need to focus on today? And, every once in a while I think like, gosh, did I really do anything? What was helpful? And I ask, what was helpful about our call today? And it was like, it blows me away at how helpful it is. So there's the piece about listening. It's absolutely critical as a leader that you truly listen and you're not looking at your phone or, you're doing your email in meetings. That sets a bad example. And sort of, communicates that you don't necessarily find what the person is saying is valuable. But being fully present allows you to manifest more of that creativity that you're talking about. And I will say that after I've ridden, and so if you're around like, a 1,800-pound animal, you kind of got to watch yourself.
Yeah.
You're not checking your email.
Yeah.
And then on the way back, that's when I have my best thoughts or my ideas about how to solve things, solve problems. So I love that. And those things are critical. I mean, I think workplaces should all have, like ping pong tables and things like that.
Yeah, I think it's weird. There's that culture. Well, first of all, people have to get back in the office more.
Well, there is that.
But yeah, I think especially being from California and all of that, being able to have that release and stuff, so that you can kind of turn that environment into something a little bit more friendly to disarm it. But any other interesting points in your article that you would see that you drew parallels to what we read about in the FDIC?
So I think I wrote another article called Why Cowboy Leadership Works. So it's all about setting boundaries and setting clear expectations and having there be consequences. So, you have to communicate a little bit differently with a horse than a person. You talk to him, but you talk to him differently with your body language and all of that. And one of the things that I've really learned over the last couple of years, and I work with a fabulous trainer, is how important clear expectations are and then consequences. So what I see in terms of in that article that is about it's about boundaries, but it's also about psychological safety. Is there was all this poor behavior that went unchecked, and there it doesn't mean that you scream at somebody or yell at them because they've done something inappropriate, but you did this, and here's what happens. And essentially, what they did was they set the precedent that you can do that, and well, it's okay. We're just going to transfer you. We might even give you a promotion. So that, so what that means in terms of psychological safety is that there's another, if you think about the chilling effect of hierarchy, right? So just when the CEO or when your boss gets angry or is frustrated, that has a different effect on you than one of your team members being angry or frustrated, right? Because that person can control your career to some extent. And so when that person can exhibit really poor behavior that goes unchecked, there's no safety for the people who really need it the most.
Yeah. What's interesting is that one of my friends worked at Edison in California, Southern California Edison, and within their workplace, they, he works in IT, and he was out in their location, and pretty soon they heard a ton of gunshots, and it was a pretty pretty well-known situation where one of the employees kind of went over the edge and then came to the campus, and it was brutal. And I was talking to him about preparing for the show with you, and I said, this being able to get a perspective on psychological safety, and he immediately is like, Troy, you have no idea that was like, we had to study that for like a couple years after the shootings here to see what things you look for and to check out the environment. And it made me kind of realize, like, pretty significant, especially in this day and age. You see the mass shootings, and you see all this stuff. It's like you really got to kind of be not only attuned to make sure you're providing a safe work space with the way you deal with people, but how do you react to some of the people that may be having other problems outside of work?
Well, and that's the thing, is you never know. So being kind, I mean, that's really important. You never know if somebody had a really bad day, if they lost somebody close to them, if they're really struggling with a health issue themselves or with a family member. So there's something called trauma-informed care. So learning how to approach people that are having difficulty, in a not in a kind of punitive way, but in a supportive de-escalation sort of way. There's also something called mental health first aid that the National Council of Mental Wellbeing offers as a training, which I think is really positive. I think, though, there's all of that you can do that usually, human resources departments, they figure out that's a big part of their job, right? In terms of leaders, though, I'll tell you the single most important thing, I think, is always having a problem-solving mindset. Something went wrong. You know what? Things go wrong all the time. It's just part of life. And it's, if nothing ever went wrong, we would not have jobs because we wouldn't be fixing any problem, right? So there's that. It is hard to stay in a problem-solving mindset when you're stressed, just as we saw with the chairman. But if you can train yourself to stay away from blaming people, because that eats away at psychological safety, and say, like, and ask questions, not like, why did you do that? But, okay, let's figure this out. Tell me a little bit about what happened here and what you think we can do. Have you thought of any solutions? Partnering with your team member, whether it's somebody that reports directly to you, but your demeanor with everybody is always positive and supportive. Problem-solving mindset, that is the number one thing.
Yeah. The construct like you're starting to lay out is, it's, I guess, maybe in closing, as we start to get to the end here, is like things like you said that you look for, as a leader. And again, I'm getting my coaching from you. We're going to take advantage of this opportunity. But when I read the article, it was like you said, I think the problem-solving mindset was something. But I don't know. I think there's kind of two different types of work environment in tech. Like there's the big tech like IBM that I'm at, and big consulting companies. Then there's high tech startups or smaller, and the company that I had before this. You do know people a little bit closer, and the boundaries aren't as big. And I don't know. And I had talked about this with Les and other executive coaches on. It's like sometimes I'm not sure how far to go. I want to be compassionate. I want to be a problem solver, but I also don't want to cross the boundary. I want to be respectful. And so I think that's maybe from your perspective, like going through, if you're starting to see trouble coming, or even behavior within your managers at the mid-tier and the way that they're treating people. I think the thing that you and I've always talked about is to don't just let it go by, take action.
Yeah, exactly. And have a conversation. I know it can even be a little bit tell me a little bit about what's going on in your team. So I always like to start with like a non-question question like that, to get the other person talking, meaning like the manager, if it's somebody that reports to me, tell me what's going wrong here, but I don't want to say, tell me what's going wrong here, because, hey, nothing's going wrong here. Right. So tell me a little bit about how things are going on their team. Get them to get them to share, maybe unload a little bit. That's totally fine. And then have them use coaching. So a little bit of coaching, like a baseball coach or football coach. University of Michigan did do well this year.
Yeah, don't get me going. Yeah.
And then
I was afraid you were going to bring that up, actually.
I've got 3 degrees from Michigan, and everybody in my family went there. So
one of my bosses is in Michigan, and
we are a loyal bunch.
Yes,
let me tell you.
Yeah.
Let me tell you.
Hopefully, it don't affect my career, but yes.
I'll have to get you a Michigan T-shirt. So anyway, so the using coaching, like Jim Harbaugh.
Yeah.
Telling you what to do, telling people what to do, or giving them the benefit of your advice. But what is a more subtle and very effective tool is to use coaching like an executive coach. So as part of our Leadership Academy, we teach that. And then most of our monthly webinars have some element of coaching to it. So you're reminding me as you raise the issue, you see somebody, maybe they're even, that, for example, their spouse is really having difficulty. And they're behind, they're missing work, there are all sorts of issues, is again, being in problem-solving mindset, not about solving their problem, but finding out, one, do they need support? Do they need to go out on FMLA? That's okay. But oftentimes what people do is they don't address that there's a problem, and they don't, because you still have to hold the person accountable. And so back in January, I interviewed actually a very experienced director at one of our clients, because she's had to do this so often, and she had kind of an amalgamation of cases. So we did the interview, and then I did a coaching demonstration. So the key is to offer empathy and then coach them around, how can they, because they're probably really stressed out, how can they parse the problem so they can get through it and solve it? And then if they can't do that, then you want to circle back to, do we need to come up with something else? Do we need to change what your work is right now? And again, no judgment, nothing. We're just in problem-solving mode. The work needs to be done. And so, but at the same time, it's not about putting pressure on the person to do that, along with dealing with whatever personal crisis they're going through.
Well, and that's very helpful. And like I said, I'm appreciative that we've had the opportunity to kind of catch up. And I really, there was a couple other articles, and we'll have to kind of do this again. But I thought it would be very timely to kind of have the discussion. And like I said, I think where I'm at right now too, just trying to get some advice on, building that culture, and trying to kind of think what are the right next steps.
Yeah. So remember that culture is about leadership. So it's about who you're being and how you're handling your stress. And as you've pointed out, knowing your blind spots and building that trust in your team. Everybody wants a team that performs well and that has a sense of well-being, like they like coming to work. And that's about who you are as a leader. It's not about, doing yoga, going for a run. I mean, it is, but it isn't. It's more about having an environment in which you feel psychologically safe and that you can do your best work.
Awesome. Well, again, Ann, we will have to get together here fairly soon.
Definitely. We're looking forward to seeing you. Maybe even a barbecue.
And maybe I get to see the horse too.
Exactly.
Thank you, Ann. You have a good one.
You too.
Thank you. Thanks again for joining me today on the Ameritocracy Show. Be sure to follow me on social media and our website at troyedgar.com, where you can get more information and sign up for my weekly email. I hope you have a great week.